with this world we're living in, a world full of challenges and uncertainty, actually, a world post-pandemic, full of geopolitical tensions, debt crisis, energy crisis, disruptions on chain supply, etc. Just name it. So what can emerge from this in terms of world order?
This session is going to be very disappointing for the audience because, I mean, one could expect the visionary or the academic to come and say what is going to happen in the future. So if you look at the World Risk Report that was published by the World Economic Forum at the beginning of this year in Davos, the world executives, they have stated that the key challenges for the world are the ones that you have mentioned: climate change, geopolitical issues, food security, and so on. And I have two comments to make about that. The first one is that if you look at the 2019 report, the statements were exactly the same. So in 2019, if you look at the World Risk Report published by the World Economic Forum, executives said again that the risks for the world would be food security, geopolitical crisis, and sustainability. The point I'm trying to make is that we're a disaster at making forecasts, and we keep on making them. And I think if you look at the big themes that are going to be relevant, they're relevant. Obviously, this is what I call the gray rhinos. You know, everybody sees them. We know that we need to tackle them, like the sustainability crisis, the climate crisis, all of the other geopolitical issues. But the issues that are going to change the world are totally unpredictable. I call this the era of ignorance, in the sense that I don't know what is going to happen in the coming years that is going to change the world. We need to be prepared.
But in general, they say that pandemics and wars are turning points in history in general.
Exactly.
But wars and pandemics were in the past, but why now we say it's unprecedented? Why we failed and we're still failing to predict in which direction the world and the world order is going?
I think there are, and I have a lot of, I'm in a business school, so I have a lot of experience with corporate executives, and I'm old enough already to have seen this coming repeatedly. I think there are two mistakes that executives and politicians make. One is we extrapolate a lot. That is, we look at what has happened in the past. I mean, in 2019, for example, if you remember, we had the fires, the wildfires in Australia. Yes. We had natural catastrophes in India, in California. So when you ask executives what is the major risk for the world, they mention environmental disasters. So we extrapolate a lot. And the second mistake is that we don't learn from our mistakes. We don't go back in time and then we say, what did we say in 2015 that our scenarios were? And actually, when you do that exercise, you consistently see that scenarios that we set are totally wrong. Pessimistic scenarios are never pessimistic enough, and optimistic scenarios are never optimistic enough. So I'm in a very fatalistic in that perspective, and I think my approach is that we need to be prepared for the unthinkable much more than trying to predict what is going to be happening.
Can we be prepared, Dr. Samir? What do you think? Can we be prepared if we fail to predict what's going on in the world order or the world in general?
You know, I think one way of looking at where we are today is to try to examine who has stakes in the world today and what are the drivers of those stakes. Clearly, you could make an assessment that the United States does not necessarily believe it needs to invest as much as it did in the past in the order that exists today. You know, from its responses during the pandemic, from its role in various crises around the world, from its current economic posture, including the IRA, which is quite nationalist in its dimensions. It's a gentler version of Make America Great Again. But if you look at the American fatigue with the world order, it's quite clear that they have now reached a point where they do not believe they need to invest as much to sustain it. The Chinese believe that they need to reshape the world order because the one that exists does not serve the purpose of Beijing. The Russians believe that they have to oppose the world order no matter who makes it because that is their business model. So the question that really exists is that who has the most amount of stake in the world of the future, and therefore are there new actors who are willing to invest in it. And I truly believe that South Asia, the Middle East, or West Asia as we call it in India, and other parts of the emerging world, from Indonesia to South Africa to countries in Latin America, we will have to step up. We can no longer be complaining from the sidelines. We know the Americans are not going to be the good actors they were. We know the Chinese love being different actors. We know Russian like being bad actors. We will have to create coalitions and partnerships that will have to build the world order. The pandemic, as you mentioned, was a cry out loud that the world order as we know it is no longer functioning. You know, we had the best institutions that we had invested for in 7 decades. We had reports that said that the cities that are most competent to respond to the pandemic would be New York and London. You know, those reports were rubbish, the institutions are rubbish. And we are trying to continue to sustain an international system that has failed us for the last 2 decades. The 21st century has been an ungoverned century. It is time we build the institutions for this century, and we in this region, in the Indo-Pacific, as the previous speaker mentioned, will have to invest our resources, will have to invest our time, and we cannot believe that someone else will come and do it for us. It is time to do it ourselves.
What do you think, Prof. Arturo?
No,
And what
so-
are the main challenges?
But
So-
you know, so I agree, but of course the question is how is this transition going to happen? I mean, totally agree that the world order, the way it is built today, doesn't make any sense. That is not in line with the economic powers like India, Brazil, or Germany. You know that they don't have a massive role in the international order. But to me, the big question is: so how we are going to go through this transform? It has to be. It cannot be gradual. It has to be driven by a certain shock that will happen. So now we will reconsider this entire.
No, so if your question is that this period could be turbulent, could have violence,
Yes.
could have conflicts, we are already living it.
Yeah.
I think the last 5 or 6 years tell us that we are going through a rather turbulent phase. We have lost a large part of humankind to the pandemic because we were all selfish. We were not willing to share. We were not willing to use the global institutions to deliver responses to different parts of the world. We have lost people. Now, how much more bloodshed do we need to understand that the transition is upon us? Now, are we going to see a big war? I think that's the hidden dimension. Are we going to see a large conflict that is going to eventually reset those who sit on the high table? I hope not. But you know, history may not repeat itself. It certainly rhymes. And there is always a chance that if we are not wise enough, we may decide to normalize the use of force as the form of dialogue. I hope we have learned as humankind over the last 75 years. I hope we have become wiser. I hope we are able to at least have conversations. Now, what happens in Europe does not give me hope. I see two sides wanting to continue to fight forever. I just don't hear sane voices seeking peace, seeking off-ramps, seeking pathways to solutions. I see on Twitter, and by the way, Twitter decides the mood of governments and mood of policies. Unfortunately, social media is today the global governance framework that we live with. We have to be very careful that we have to reclaim the space, allow adult conversations inside rooms to create pathways that are sensible. I worry we may be heading to a conflict. Europe is a sign that no one seems to be investing in peace. I hope the old continent does not infect the new world again. Europe has damaged the world many times over. And I hope this time sensible European heads can resolve their problems. You know, I remember them coming and telling us in different parts of the world that be sensible, be rational, be mature, be patient. I think we all have to go there and say this to Europe now. You know, it is time for us to take a delegation, multi-country delegation, and go and tell the Europeans that, you know, this is what you told us over the last 5 decades. Now I'm going to replay it back to you. I hope Europe gets its act together. It is not looking good.